Wspieraj kanał magazynu Układ Sił na Patronite. Link do wsparcia znajdziesz w opisie filmu.
Hello everyone, my name is Marek Stefan, and today I have a pleasure to talk with Mr. Frederick Fleitz, Vice Chair of America First Policy Institute. Mr. Fleitz served in 2012 as a Deputy Assistant of President Donald Trump and Chief of Staff of National Security Council. Mr. Fleitz served in United States National Security position for 25 years with the CIA and DIA, the Department of State, and the House Intelligence Committee staff. And today I want to ask you about the current situation in the Middle East, about the evolution of American grand strategy, especially on the base on the new strategic documents. We have a new national security strategy and new national defense strategy. Very important documents, not only for Americans but also for partners and allies of United States. But first, of course, I want to start our conversation about the question of your assessment of current situation in the Persian Gulf. What are the strategic and political objectives of this military campaign against regime in Tehran? Are they clear to you?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I come to these issues after having worked for 25 years in U.S. government national security jobs, mostly with the Central Intelligence Agency, but I was also Chief of Staff of the Trump National Security Council. I've written extensively on Iran's nuclear weapons program. I wrote one book on this in 2011. I have another one coming out in early 2027. And we're seeing a military operation being conducted for two reasons. First of all, the determination by President Trump that Iran's nuclear missile programs posed an unacceptable threat to regional and global security. And Trump has been clear, Iran cannot be permitted to get a nuclear weapon. Now, you may remember that Trump insisted on a ceasefire last June after the 12-day war, and the Israelis did not want to agree to that. They wanted to keep attacking. But Trump said, you want a peace? He thought the Iranians would move on in peace, but they didn't. They proceeded to try to rebuild their nuclear missile programs. I think their nuclear program is years away, but their missile program has made significant advances. Iran reportedly is making 50 to 100 missiles a month. And if this attack didn't take place now, it would have so many missiles, it simply wouldn't be practical to stage an attack. After the brutal crackdown on Iranians earlier this year, Trump said help will be on the way, but he still negotiated with the Iranian leadership to see if we could find a way to resolve our differences and stand with the people of Iran. The regime did not want to negotiate. They wanted to play for time like they did last June, like they did with repeated U.S. governments through history. And frankly, when they would not negotiate, given the surge in Iran's missile program, the U.S. gave a green light to the Israelis to attack. They've wanted to attack Iran again for several months. And we have an effort right now to defend U.S. and global interests, but also to open a pathway for the Iranian people to take back their government and do away with this ruthless theocracy that has executed tens of thousands just this year for demonstrating for freedom.
Mm-hmm. President Trump recently mentioned that the campaign against Iran could last for weeks. However, according to many experts, the United States has a limited capabilities in terms of the precision guide munitions, both defensively and offensively. These stockpiles could be depleted within the next 2 weeks of intensive strikes. From the perspective of American allies in Europe and also in maybe especially in East Asia, this could be a problem, as it's not only the weakness of the weakness of the deterrence against Russia and China, but may also affect the process of procuring military equipment from American defense companies by US allies. How would you comment this?
Well, first, Trump has been clear that this is not going to be an unending war. This is going to be about a month, no more than 6 weeks of combat. And of course, there's critics who don't know what they're talking about, who claim the U.S. is close to running out of weapons. They don't know what America's arsenal is. The arsenal is not unlimited. But I think the issue here is that Iran is already running out of missiles. Iran's missile defense system has been destroyed. Its navy has been sunk. And we're now moving on to a much more aggressive and ambitious effort to not just destroy weapons of mass destruction related sites, but security related sites where we have personnel who have been used to oppress and kill the Iranian people. That's going to be the focus. And remember, we're just 4 days into this war. And Trump said yesterday the worst is yet to come for this regime.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the current Tehran regime are better prepared for this phase of conflict than in June last year?
I think they were taken off guard by this attack. I don't think they thought the U.S. and Israel would launch such a comprehensive attack. I think they sincerely believed that they could stretch out negotiations because Trump wouldn't attempt an attack like this. I mean, in the past, he made many statements that he wanted to keep the U.S. out of new and unnecessary wars. And it looked like the attacks in June was an exception to that. But Trump has said he does want to keep the U.S. out of new and unnecessary wars. But there are times when he believes American presidents have to use military force to defend our interests, and this is one of them.
Mm-hmm. In your opinion, what does the current war with Iran mean for Russia and China? Is it really the case of some claim that losses among the Iranian elites are perceived a catastrophe for Chinese and the Russian interests in the Middle East? Or, paradoxically, from the perspective of both of these powers, could another American war in the Middle East once again be seen as an opportunity to entangle the United States in a conflict at the expense of containing Russia and, above all, the China?
Well, Russia and China have used Iran as a useful ally. Maybe it's better to say as a proxy to counter and frustrate the United States. So the weaker Iran gets under this current regime, the better for global security and the worse for Russia and China. We know that Iran has been providing a large number of attack drones to Russia to use in the war in Ukraine. I would think that the flow of those drones has stopped now because Iran needs to use them domestically to defend against the U.S. and Israeli attacks. And all these drone factories are going to soon be destroyed if they're not already destroyed. The capabilities of these drones are frankly extraordinary. You may know that Iranian drones were used to attack British bases in Cyprus and to attack the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. That really shows technical capabilities that most people didn't know the Iranians had. Now, those who follow the Iranian missile program were aware they had this capability based on attacks by the Houthi rebels they were able to hit Tel Aviv from their bases in Yemen, which is about 1,000 kilometers. That's a pretty significant technical achievement. We know the Houthi rebels were also striking Saudi oil facilities across the Arabian Peninsula. So, those of us who follow this, knew Iran's drone and missile capability was getting better. And I think that's another reason why the Trump administration was determined to attack.
Mm-hmm. At the beginning of our conversation, I mentioned about the newest American strategic documents, National Security Strategy and also National Defense Strategy. And in both of these documents, the authors claim that the most important strategic objective for Washington, for United States, it's of course protect of American soil, American borders. The second objective is to protect American interest in Western Hemisphere. The third most important object is to save American interest and of course the balance of power in the Pacific region, and next in Europe, and next in Middle East. But now we see that the most affected moment, and that United States and Pentagon focus very much on the situation on Middle East to contain Iran. So how do you comment this?
Well, I'd first say that what was really extraordinary about these documents was the emphasis that it placed on the U.S. Reasserting its dominance of the Western Hemisphere. And this was because of Trump's determination to stop the flow of illegal migrants into our country. At least 11 million illegal migrants came into our country during the Biden administration because Joe Biden refused to secure our southern border. We know how illegal migrants open borders is destroying Europe. I mean, Poland's taken a determined stand against this, as has Hungary. But we see the rising crime rates and other problems throughout Europe because European states made the foolish decision to simply allow open immigration. That's done, and Trump wanted to deal with the source of this illegal migration by trying to establish order in the Western Hemisphere, and that led to the operation in Venezuela. But if you're going to say that the Middle East wasn't a high priority in these documents sort of give a window into the thinking of the Trump administration. They're not a rule book or a binding guide. American national security strategy is whatever President Trump decided is going to be. And I think these documents give some idea as to his thinking, the thinking of his advisors. But as I said, it's sort of general guidance, and the strategy is going to change over time.
So do you agree that, especially in the Republican political accounts, but also around the current Trump administration, we see the clash between the two vision of the future of America grand strategy? The one team, one camp is the restrainers, and the another is the primacist. Do you agree with this assessment?
No, I don't. I don't really use those titles. I don't think they make any sense. I think there's a small minority of people in the MAGA movement who are isolationists. I think Tucker Carlson would be in that group, and I think there's the America First group that stands with President Trump to keep America out of new and unnecessary wars, but that the president sometimes will need to use military force to defend our national security. Look, Trump's movement is not monolithic. There's disagreement and debate within it. But what we saw in June, when we heard some of the isolationist fringe complaining about the attacks on Iran, most of them said, well, we don't completely agree with this, but we trust President Trump. We back him. And we know he has access to intelligence that we don't have, and that presidents have to make very difficult decisions that, frankly, we are not in a position to understand.
Mm-hmm. One of the most important points in national security strategy and national defense strategy, but also we see and we heard what Secretary Hexet and Deputy Secretary Colby said a couple weeks ago in Europe, that United States is seeking the model allies in many in Europe, in Middle East, and in East Asia. Do you think that Poland could be one of the model ally of United States in current times?
I think Poland would be, I would definitely consider Poland a state that would be considered a model ally. I think its efforts to stand with the people of Ukraine have been extremely admirable. But I mean, if we're going to try to talk about statements by U.S. officials on where U.S. national security policy is after the national defense and national security strategies, I mean, I think Hegseth and Colby said some interesting things, but Marco Rubio's extraordinary speech at the Munich Security Conference, I would pay most attention to that, because I think what he did was to sort of give a summary of American policy after a year, deal with some policy differences with Europe, talk about how America is a child of Europe. And wants Europe to succeed. We're not pulling out of NATO. We're not pulling out of Europe. I think he answered a lot of criticisms that, frankly, had begun to spin out of control.
Mhm. What is the primary goal of United States grand strategy now during the Trump administration? I mean, especially in the relation with the China. We see that the current American administration seek some diplomatic solution and to keep going their trade talks with the China authorities. What is your assessment of this?
It's a difficult strategy. It means being tough with China on security threats, threats to Taiwan, intellectual property threats, exploitation of trade, but also trying to engage China diplomatically to improve diplomatic relations to lower tensions between the two countries. Trump is trying to do both simultaneously. And I think that's why we've seen some compromise on tariffs. That's why we see Trump planning to visit China in April. And it is a way of trying to work with a state that many call an adversary to try to maintain a good working relationship with it, but also to hold China accountable for policies that the U.S. finds troubling.
Mm-hmm. And the same question about the current stance of America and Donald Trump administration toward Russia. What is your assessment, especially? We see that what Trump administration want to do in this contact with the Moscow authorities around Ukraine. America want to better burden sharing with the European allies. So, what is your assessment of this process here in Europe? Because this is especially important, very important for us in Poland.
Trump's priority concerning the war in Ukraine is to stop the killing. That's always been his approach. It's not the approach of the prior administration that wanted to provide limited weaponry for as long as it takes. But there were no efforts by the Biden administration to begin dialogue with Moscow to try to find a way to end the conflict. There were no European state that was engaged in any effort to do that. So although Trump has not solved this conflict yet, he's at least set up a framework to attempt to do so and to try to engage the Russians diplomatically. It's pretty clear that negotiating with Russia is much more difficult than Trump anticipated. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's Putin's fanaticism about Ukraine not actually being a country and the Ukrainians not being a separate people. And the reality is that Putin has been extremely isolated since the beginning of the Biden administration. You know, Joe Biden once compared Putin to Hamas. And I think Trump's approach is that if we can engage the Russians diplomatically, if we can find a way to bring Russia into the community of European nations as a member in good standing, we could give him an alternative to this war. We could give him an honorable way out. Now, you and I might argue, well, that's not just because Putin is a war criminal. I certainly agree with that, but I don't see a way to get a totally just solution in Ukraine. I think the best solution is to stop the war and to stop the killing. That's where Trump is also. Since Putin has refused these offers by Trump, extremely generous offers, I think very tough American economic and energy sanctions are coming. I don't think Trump's patience is unlimited with Putin. He's trying to engage Putin diplomatically. You know, there was supposed to be a summit between Putin and Trump in Hungary a couple of months ago, but when Trump got word that Putin was going to come there and not negotiate, Trump called it off, and I think that was a principled decision. So it may be a long struggle, but I can tell you that President Trump is not going to give up his efforts to end this war in Ukraine, and I wish I could say I saw an end in sight to the war, but at this time I don't.
So you expect that Trump administration impose more economic sanction on Russia?
Well, there's a bipartisan Senate bill that would impose very crippling sanctions on Russia. I think that's coming. And we can see other ways that Trump is doing this. This new agreement with India, under which the Indian government is supposed to stop buying energy from Russia, that is part of this strategy also. There's also an effort to intercept the so-called ghost fleet that is illegally transferring Russian oil to other nations. So basically, the noose is tightening around Putin, and hopefully will force him to negotiate in good faith and agree to a bona fide ceasefire.
Mhm. And my last question: what if Donald Trump achieve his objective toward Russia, and Russia agree to stop war against Ukraine? Because this is also important for us what happened after the war. For example, we see that the Americans, some group of American business want to invest in Russia, not only in Ukraine after war, but also in Russia. And of course, we see that in Russia also we have some business groups very interested in this business contact with the American business. So, do you think that this it could be some political geopolitical reset between Moscow and Washington?
I think that America has to start talking with our friends in Europe, including our Polish friends, about what our ultimate policy with Russia will be. Will we continue to demonize Russia and push it into the arms of China, or will we find a way to somehow welcome it back into Europe as a state in good standing? We know historically Russia is a European state, not an Asian state. And this growing alliance between Russia and China is very dangerous. It's very destabilizing with global security. What will we do with Russia when the war is over? Will we continue to isolate it? Will we continue to punish it? That may make us feel good, but it's a bad move for global security. And I hope the people of Poland, experts in Poland, are thinking through, where will we go with Russia if we end the war? And look, maybe it won't be possible to normalize relations with Russia until Putin leaves the political scene. But we have to have a long-term plan to engage with the Russians and bring them away from this alliance with China, which I think is extremely dangerous for global security. And I think there will be a day, if we work hard at this, to actually strike a relationship where we normalize relations with Russia. We move them away from this system of despotism and corruption. I mean, Trump has talked about adding Russia back to the G7 as a G8. Now, I know a lot of members of the G7, they find that offensive, but that's the right objective. Find a way to get Russia re-engaged in the global community and in Europe as a state in good standing.
I, of course, understand your strategic position and your strategic interest to not to push Russia to the arms of Chinese. But from our perspective in Poland, we also some fears that if United States, if the current administration or maybe the next American administration decided to open the new chapter of relation with Russia, the Moscow one could try to achieve another goals, their strategic goals, and maybe wants to remove American troops from Eastern Europe, like Mr. Lavrov said in December 2021, that the strategic goal of the Russia is to roll back of NATO from the eastern flank, and they still put this argument on the table, and I think it's the Russians never forget about it, and they return to this topic in every conversation with the American counterparts. So from our perspective, it's still very very dangerous, and this is our fears. How do you comment it?
The United States is not going to agree to that. I think the The bigger danger is that if a Democratic president is elected in 2028, that president will return to the policies of just demonizing Russia and doing nothing about the war in Ukraine. I'm more worried about that. The U.S. Congress is absolutely committed to NATO, no matter who the next president is. That's going to stay the same. But I do think trying to find a way to lower tensions with Russia and bringing it back into the community of nations and the community of European nations is the best ultimate approach.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Today, my guest was Mr. Fred Fleitz from America First Policy Institute. Thank you once again.
Good to be here.